Good morning, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming. Some of you might have seen Paul earlier in the week when he spoke at an IPA event, but many of you wouldn't have, and you can't hear this message too often, and you're going to hear it often, and it will evolve inevitably. The executive agency, the Digital Transformation Office, formally began in our portfolio on the 1st of July, but of course there have been a team of people seconded to work in it since late last year. So Paul has come in at a really interesting stage. So decisions have been made about strategy, but there's a lot of implementation detail that Paul is looking at and trying to work out how to turn that vision that the government had for the DTO into an operating reality. For Paul himself, he comes to this job with a really interesting background. He has this mixture of private sector at both the large multinational corporate end and private sector at the startup end. He has public sector experience. He's worked in line agencies in the United Kingdom government, and he's worked in the central government digital service in the UK as well. So he's seen the DTO type activity from the edge and from the centre. And he's something, as I said on Tuesday, as a citizen of the world. You might think at this stage that he's a POM, but you're about to find out that he's the most unlikely sounding POM. But we're sure he's not going to talk about the cricket ball. That's one thing I can say for sure. So please join me in welcoming Paul Shetler.
Thank you, Drew. So this is where I come from the States, actually. And I moved to the UK about 13.5 years ago for a variety of different things. I'd like to talk about the DTO, though, and why we're here. And that's sort of the one question that everybody sort of wonders, well, what is this DTO? Why are we doing digital government? What's the importance of it? Who are all these people? What are they doing? And I guess the first most important question to answer is, we're here because people are online. People have been online for the last 20 years, 25 years, depending on how far back you go, whether you're an internet pioneer or not. But the fact is, an awful lot of people are online. Increasing amounts of their lives are lived online, whether that's through social networks or whether it's publishing or whether it's buying, going on holiday or buying books or whatever. Increasing amounts of activity are online. That's the way that we interact with each other, an increasingly mediated kind of environment. And people's expectations of services online, including government services, are shaped by their others, right? So you use a certain level of service whenever you buy something, and then you find another one, you make a comparison. So just some stats. This actually just shows, people are online, right? Should be no big surprise here. 92% of Australians use the internet. About 50% of those are using a tablet computer, and a lot of people do shopping. Right, and it's sort of shopping and e-commerce and service provision, which actually informs an awful lot of people's perceptions of online. And give some examples of that. Here we have Amazon, Uber, and bank, but you could put up anything else. You could put Expedia or, any one of a million different e-commerce or service systems online. And you'll notice a few things about them. They're almost always associated with things that are pleasurable. They're almost always things people seek out. They're not things that are usually chores. They're things you want to do. So you want to go on a holiday, you want to buy a book, you want to buy a video game or something like that. You're going to go online pretty much to buy it. And actually that might also increasingly be the means by which it is delivered to you as well. Right? So it's not just the buying of a physical thing, but also the delivery of a digital thing. Digital becoming the primary channel for delivery of products and services. They're clean. They're simple, they're well designed, not much gets in the way between you and meeting whatever need it is that those apps or services provide. Because if there was something that got in the way, you'd probably go to another one, right? Because they operate in a competitive marketplace. If they didn't do that, they'd go out of business. So you could, for instance, book a trip to go somewhere online, like Expedia or wherever, kayak. But if you then went from that to find out what you need to do when you get to the other country, maybe from Australian government websites, right, because trusted source of information, you'd have a problem. Because all that simplicity just went out the window. Now you've got a whole bunch of different sites to look at. You've got a lot of information which you need to know, or you think you might need to know, which is fragmented across all these different sites, which look different, which tell you different bits of information. Learning how to use one doesn't help you how to use the other, because the only thing they have in common is that they have nothing in common. Right? And you never really know if you've got all the information you need, because it's not typically approached from the question of what the user needs. It's a, well, this department wants to get this information out. This agency wants to get this information out. It's a piece of policy to publish this particular thing. But actually, if you look at it from the standpoint of someone who's making a trip and wants to find out what they need to do in terms of quarantine or something like that, where do they go to get all of it, to make sure they got all of it? They have to have in their head either all that information already, and then they're just double checking it, or they have to have some sort of map of the way government works. To know that I go here, 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 and here. And then be able to sort of navigate the different ways of doing things. And then, if you think about that, that's kind of crazy. It's kind of kooky. Because no business actually really operates that way. Right? If an Amazon did that, or whoever did that, you wouldn't use them. You had to go to 15 different websites to buy a book from Amazon, you just wouldn't do it. Say forget it. So, it's not just me saying this. Did some surveys. 55% of Australians say that they have problems when they're using an Australian government website. Now consider that most people's lives are lived increasingly online, and yet so many of our users have problems when they're using websites. And when they have problems using websites, typically what will end up happening is either they won't get the information they require, in which case if there was some policy reason for putting that out there, it might be obviated because people won't be acting on it. They won't know it. Or they'll call a call center or go into a drop-in center or something like that, in which case you have sort of a failure demand. I wasn't able to meet it through this channel, so now I have to address it through another channel. And the problem with that is it's very expensive. We need to do a lot better. It's very expensive, and it's not really acceptable in the age of Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, and things like that. Because people are used, we're all used to it. Right? I say people, I should say we. We in this room are all used to that. And we're all public servants. So everyone in this room has a dedication to public service. Everybody in this room cares about the people who we're serving. We all do. We're all here. In many cases, we're hamstrung by the ways that we are forced to communicate out to the outside because of the way we organize our digital presence and because of the tools that we use to work. Whether they're machines that you can't, whether they're PCs that you can't use to print a document with, or that you can't connect to a projector, or you can't send an email, or you can't copy a URL, or something like that. All of which I've seen in my 3 weeks since I joined. We need to do a lot better because we can't meet user needs if we're working that way. And if Amazon or anybody else try to meet user needs by asking people to please take a PDF file, print it out, send it to them via post, and then have somebody read that PDF file, type it into a system, and then maybe copy and paste data from a few other things and act as a human API, they would go out of business tomorrow. They couldn't possibly handle it. They couldn't possibly handle the demand. So we need to do a lot better. If we do, we can start seeing some of the benefits. So these are simple financial benefits, quite apart from making really happy users. We can also save an awful lot of money. This was a report that came out on Monday. So some of the interesting takeaways from that. But a digital transaction costs about 40 cents, 41 cents. Telephone one costs 16 times that much, $6.60. By post, $12.79. And if you're doing it face-to-face, it costs about $16.90. This is from the Deloitte study that was just published. So you can see that not only is it not even a really good user experience, it's also really expensive. So we can lower the cost, and we can provide better services. We can do better for less, because in many cases, the high cost is the high cost of doing things not as well as we could or not as well as we should. And our opportunity is huge. Opportunity is huge. So not only can we save a lot of money, but we can also start restoring public faith in government. Because one of the biggest problems that every government is facing around the world right now is lowered budgets, less money to spend, increased demands, and the fact that many citizens are saying, my gosh, can't you do better than this? Everyone else seems to be able to do better than this. Gee, why can't you do better than this? And there's a drip, drip, drip of inadequate service. It's the death of 1,000 cuts that undermines public faith in government. And that is why we're here, to fix that. It's not a policy issue, it's a delivery issue. Everybody in this room cares about that. All public servants care about that. We're doing our best now to work with you to fix that. The vision that's been laid out for the Digital Transformation Office and the ambition that Australia has is to get rid of that need to carry that map of government in your head. So you as a citizen, we as citizens, don't need to know that when I have a baby, I have to go to this department and that agency, I have to talk to this agency to this state, and then do something in this locality, in this particular order, and if I don't do that right, things might go wrong. But no, I just want to have a relationship with government, because people think of government as government. People really do. In our own departments, we might think of our own departments, and I certainly think of the DTO, but actually, we're the Australian government. And that's what people think of us. So we need to start presenting ourselves back out that way. That is how all other online experiences are received by their users, and that's how they're all presented out. So we have an opportunity to do that. We have an opportunity to fix service across channels, an opportunity to radically redesign and radically improve the citizens' experience of government, and to put Australia in the forefront. Every other country that has tried doing this has had a more limited ambition, I think. If you look at what happened in the UK, they've done great work. GDS, working from the center, worked with departments to redesign both the experience of using the web in pre-UK government, so the publishing platform. So when you wanted to find information, it all looked the same, it was all consistent, it's all organized in the same way. Knowing how to go on gov.uk, you know how to use the entire site. No longer do I have to figure out 1,300 different websites. I have one website. That's absolutely brilliant. And they started working on fixing the actual services, the transactions, the interactions, when you want to get something from the government, right? But that was only central, and an awful lot of what happens in the UK is done by the NHS, which is not part of that, in terms of what GDS is primarily work, nor is all the work that happens in localities. In Australia, we want to go beyond that. We want to provide a framework so that people actually can have user journeys that cross departmental, agency, state boundaries. That's huge, because that's how people get to have that relationship with government. The other thing we want to do is move beyond the idea of a digital channel just being something completely separate to everything else. So keeping in mind that actually sometimes things do need to be done face-to-face, and when I do that thing face-to-face, it needs to be reflected in my digital channel. All right, so I don't have things happening in separate little silos that don't know about each other. That's also how we'll be able to drive channel shift. Right? If we're going to be able to want to realize the financial benefits of digitalization, we need to own all the channels. We need to be able to do service redesign across all those channels. We need to make it a great experience, and we also need to be able to steer people towards the digital channel as a channel of choice and provide assisted digital support for those who cannot or will not use the digital channel. So the opportunity is absolutely huge, both in terms of user satisfaction, which is the number one thing, and in terms of cost, which hopefully should fall out of that. And the way we're going to get there is by doing things a little bit differently. So the DTO, our slogan is users first. So you can have a brilliant policy, but unless actually users choose to use that, the service you provide to implement that, the policy will be obviated. It doesn't matter. If people don't use it, it doesn't happen. The only way you get people to use what you want to do is to do what they actually need. Service has to be focused around the needs of users first, not of government departments, not of government agencies, not of particular bureaucracies, but of the actual users who use that. You need to actually talk with the users, see what they do. Not only ask them questionnaires, not only get feedback that way, which we then can interpret whatever we want, but actually see what they do when they use the service. What do they actually do? How do they actually act? Don't ask them questions always. Also watch. See what it's like for them. And have some empathy and some humility when we do that. Because we don't necessarily always know what's best for our users. We need to let them let us know. Thinking big, but starting small. So that kind of a vision of government as government, rather than government as state, local, or department, or agency, or whatever, is a really big vision. It's bigger than any other vision that's out there right now. And we're not going to get there by trying to do it all at once. We're not going to get there by trying to boil the ocean. We're going to get there by doing small things, delivering them very quickly, and then iterating them, changing them, improving them, making sure that they actually do meet user needs, and then we continue to do so as we move along. So it's a long-term program, but we're not going to say it's all going to be delivered at once, because of one thing. We deliver over a period of time in chunks, slices, and increments. It's the only way to get things done. Right? You can't wait to deliver everything before you deliver anything. And in doing things and getting things out quickly, we'll actually have a chance to see what works. And that brings us to the next point. So the DTO is all about quick delivery. Mike Bracken in the UK like to say the strategy is delivery. And that's quite right. Delivery lets us cut through the morass of strategy and policy options and looking at edge cases and what ifs and so on and so forth, and all the whataboutery that can happen, but actually focus on what do people actually need, how are they using it, what's actually happening when they have the service, how can we watch them and learn from them so we can provide the best possible service for our users. That is why we're here as public servants, provide the best possible services for the people of Australia. And we can only do that by getting things out there quickly so we can see what people actually do. Remember, if somebody's having a baby or somebody needs to visit somebody in prison, they don't have a year for us to figure out our act. We have to deliver quickly. We have to deliver within human timescales and not geological timescales. Once we've done that, we have to iterate and improve rapidly. So iterate wildly. That might mean improving the service 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. That's the kind of timescales we're talking about. That's the kind of timescales our commercial is happening in the commercial world. Google does hundreds of updates a day to their software, right? Amazon updates theirs hundreds of times a day. We need to be able to start doing that. We need to think that way. In the UK, where I came from, that is how our teams work. We were able to do that and deliver brilliant services really quickly. That's how we learn from users, and that's how we make changes. It also means that when we deliver a small incremental change, a small incremental service, people don't say, oh, well, you're just going to walk away from that, and I'm screwed. Think about how traditional IT tends to work. There's lots of promises made up front, big, grand specifications, and then something is delivered at the end, which meets a certain amount of those specifications. There's usually a certain amount of disappointment. People say, oh, well, guess what? We didn't really understand everything at the beginning of the project. Now we're going to have to make some change controls. Our idea is to get rid of the change control, have change control be subsumed into the process. We're not actually delivering something and then walking away from it. We're constantly improving it. That way people know we're darn serious when we're talking about minimum viable products, and they understand that we are sticking to what we are doing. And that leads to the final idea, which is we're not delivering projects, we're delivering products. And there's a big difference between that. So a product has a beginning date and it has an end date. And at the beginning is when you typically know the least amount about what's going to go wrong and what the needs really are. Is when you think you know everything, but actually you know the least. And every single moment from the beginning of that project, you're learning a lot more. You're learning what does work, you're learning what doesn't work. Right? And then at the end of that, you've delivered something which might be 50%. What we're saying is we're delivering a living, breathing product which we deliver quickly, which we iterate constantly, which is not something which we just walk away from. It doesn't have an end date. At some point we may say, well, we've met most of the user need. We reach into a steady state, and at that point we can move into maintenance. But it's not a beginning and an end in the traditional way of doing things. It's a product with an evolution. I'll give an example of what I mean, because that might have seemed very abstract. So when I was at Ministry of Justice, I was responsible for delivery of 4 of the government's exemplars, and I had about 16 other large digital products which we were delivering. Some of them were information services, some of them were transaction services. It was a portfolio of 20 actively developing products, all of which were released very rapidly within a 20-week time box. So from our perspective, from the team's perspective, the product manager, who's the person who's responsible for that, had to deliver something which was certified as live by GDS, sort of the central digital team. That meant that they had to have something out to the public for actual view and use within about 8 weeks. And then we put it through beta, in the longer period, in the longer period. And there were stage gates where we would just check and say, did you meet these various criteria? Right? So getting something out in that kind of time frame, 8 weeks is a bit different than the usual IT time frame, means you have to think radically different about how you do stuff. So here was one exemplar. This is for civil claims. And for people who are not aware of what civil claims is, it's basically when somebody wants to go to court to get money from somebody else. For instance, you owe me money, or wants to get you out of their flat, to repossess a flat or something like that. Right? So it's a claim against another person, which is not a criminal claim. It doesn't involve the state trying to prosecute somebody, but somebody who wants something from somebody else. There's a lot of them. Well, the team had signed up for the exemplar to do civil claims. That meant everything. Right? And that's what the initial expectation was. All civil claims in the UK would be done in a digital manner, and they would be delivered that way by the end of March of this year. So I joined in January 2014. And the team at that time had no idea how they were going to deliver this, because it's massive. So this map just sort of shows what we call the service map, and it shows all the different entry points where people can actually start the process, who needs to act on the process, what the documentation are, the different bits of information, what the flows are, and so on and so forth. And you can see it's fairly complicated. And there was really actually no way that something like that could be delivered in one big bang. And in fact, my product manager at the time was rather concerned that there was no way he would be able to do that. The team didn't know how it was going to happen. And I had to go back to my management and say, we can't deliver this within the time frames you're talking about. We have to take a different approach. And the approach we decided to take was that we would look at what bit of functionality provided there, what user need could we meet within a real short time frame, 20 weeks, all the way through, right? And we realized that there were a few where we had a lot of users and a very particular problem, and therefore we could do that. We could just deliver that and focus on that particular thing. And then we could add another bit. And then we could add another bit, and then we could add another bit. And that's the approach we took. And that's how we got that out, certified live by GDS. In 20 weeks, the product continues to be iterated, and as time goes on, more and more bits and pieces of this map is filled out until finally the whole thing is done. So you can think of it, rather than putting your entire library of books up in once, just think of it as putting up a shelf and a few books in there, and then you add more and more and more until the entire bookshelf is done. Every single time you do that, though, you actually met a real need. That's the important thing. You're not just putting something out there that people don't use. Every single bit of it has to be something which provides real value to the users. And that is part of the art of product management. That's why product management is a discipline in and of its own right, and why it's not project management. Because you actually have to understand the needs and understand what will actually work, and how those things can be put in a particular order to make sense to the user. So that's the approach we took, and that's the approach we take with the DTO. Because we believe very strongly in quick delivery, iteration, and meeting needs. So DTO, we're a month old. I've been with the DTO for a couple of weeks, about 2.5 weeks. And we're all about digitizing Australian government. We're a team of product managers, delivery managers, user researchers, interaction designers, developers, technical architects, web app engineers, and so on and so forth. We've got pretty much all digital specialities inside the team, as well as some more generalist and policy experience to make sure that we can remove obstacles to digitization. And we work closely with other departments and agencies, and increasingly states and localities, to deliver our services. But that's who we are. And that's what we do. We think Australia can become the best in the world. Absolutely the best in the world at delivering digital public services. We have strong support from Cabinet, from our Minister, and from all the departments we've spoken to. Everybody is quite keen to have this happen, including in the states and localities. Every single conversation has been quite positive. There's a little bit of a change from what I was expecting a little bit. I'll be honest about it. When I joined the Ministry of Justice, my initial conversations weren't nearly as positive as these. I don't think the thirst was nearly as strong there as it is here. There's a very strong demand in the public service and in the public itself for this, and it's been great to see. It's been really, really good. It's been probably the best. We work a little bit differently to other government departments, but we're hoping that we can start sharing some of this way of working outside. We work in multidisciplinary agile teams. So every team, every product team has a product manager, and in that team, there's also a delivery manager, so somebody's responsible for removing obstacles and making sure the product actually moves ahead. We have a user researcher, so somebody who's actually looking at and examining users and how they're actually, what their needs are and how they're using the product. What do we need to change? This user story where we said, well, as a user, I need to be able to log in and I need to be able to log in with a particular set of credentials. Is that actually working or is it not? If it's not, that user researcher won't sign off on a story. It's not considered done. We have interaction designers to make sure that the entire service works in an intuitive manner. The users are actually getting things done, developers are actually writing the code, and so on and so forth. But the unit of delivery is the team. It's not like this particular person is responsible for this particular thing and no one else has anything to do with it. If the thing doesn't work, it's the team's responsibility. The entire team. You can't point fingers and say, it wasn't my job. I didn't do that. It changes the way you work. It removes hierarchy, and it means that people actually do work together to deliver the very best possible thing. We work in the open. Really important. Really important. We're not sitting in a tower writing a policy document without talking to people or anything like that, which I've seen certainly in the UK. We are starting from the standpoint of user need. We are starting from the standpoint of actually talking and watching users, working with users in the open to understand what they are, what those needs are, delivering software as an alpha, then a beta in the public. So yes, stamp it as an alpha and have some people use it and see what happens. It is production, but it's alpha. Stamp it as a beta so anyone can use it. And it's in production. And we can change that, and we will change that with every single sprint that comes along. That's very, very different to the way the government IT is usually working, but that is the direction that our colleagues all around the world are taking. And that is how we will be working. We also release all of our code on GitHub as open source, and that's really important for a number of reasons. Firstly, because the taxpayers have paid for us. All our work is funded by taxpayers. It doesn't come from anywhere else. And taxpayers have a right to use our code and to share it. Secondly, because departments need to start sharing and using each other's code. It costs, makes things cheaper, and it makes things better because things are shared and they start looking the same and acting the same. And when you use one, you know how to use the other. You don't have to be formally trained for each separate thing. It's really, really important. Thirdly, because a lot of countries around the world we're dealing with very similar kinds of problems. And we should also be able to use code developed on other places and share our stuff back out. It means, again, better, cheaper, more consistent. That's because we're part of a worldwide movement. So everyone's probably aware of the GDS, Departmental Digital Teams in the UK. There's also 18F in the United States Digital Service. There's the work that's happening in New Zealand, where the mantra now is digital by default. There's the work that's happening in Singapore, in Israel, in South Korea, in Estonia, in the Netherlands, and so on, and so on, and so on. It is a global movement because all governments are facing very similar problems. Many of us are facing budget issues. All of us are facing the same user satisfaction issues. Every single government is facing those. We can learn from each other, and we are learning from each other. We're working with each other to deliver the best digital government possible in each one of our countries. We're doing it with departments. We're not doing it to departments. Massively important. This is not us coming by and saying everything you do is rubbish, because it's not. There's been a lot of brilliant stuff been developed in Australia. It's a question of finding what the best practice is and sharing that, making it consistent across departments. We have some ideas on how digital services should be developed, and we'll be sharing that. We're also welcoming input from other people in other departments to work with on that. The digital service standard has been released. And we'd like to get comments on that. We would like people to start looking at that. We'd like people to start using it and see what actually happens when they do use it, so we can understand what we need to change. It's released as an alpha, so we eat our own dog food. Right? We don't just release the standard and say that's the standard. We say that's an alpha of the standard, because we don't know everything at the beginning of the process. We find things out as we do them, we road test them, and then we improve them, including our own standards, including our own thinking. And in the case of the digital service standard, the users are also people who are developing digital services in the departments, and we need to understand, are we doing the right thing there? Does it meet their needs as well? So, ask people to join us. Anyone who's interested, watching this live stream, contact us at uto.gov.au. Engage. We are looking for help and support. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Just one observation that I might make before throwing it open to the audience here in Canberra for questions. Your story about projects and products is a really important one. And of course, it has, you can think of that at many levels. Think of the DTO not as a project, but as a product. And think of some of the principles that you're talking about that you don't know today what you're going to be doing in 12, 24 months. There's a vision in terms of the user experience, but the pathway to get there will evolve, and it'll be user-driven. It'll be opportunity and circumstance-driven, where agencies have got some great things that you can move out, where there's a burning need that comes out of the marketplace and so on. And of course, it's a similar issue, isn't it, with, from a user perspective, users don't care a lot whether they're dealing with their local council, local government, state or territory government or the Commonwealth. It's all just government. And there'll be huge opportunities to take this or to apply this this user-centred approach to engage with our state, territory and local colleagues. But there isn't a project that says we're going to nail that by 15th of December and here's the budget and here's the Gantt chart. Right. It's really going to have to evolve through interaction.
Absolutely.
So in your first couple of weeks here, this is a bit like the sticking the microphone under the nose of a celebrity walking down the stairs and saying, what do you think of Australia so far? But at the risk of I know everybody wants a piece of your time. We've got, everybody wants to come and say, I've got to talk to the new CEO of the DTO. I get people wanting me to set up introductions for you. I'm starting to feel a bit like a dating agency, email things that I'm doing. But what are you getting from all of that? Everyone wants to talk to you, inside government and outside. What are they saying to you? What's the impression you're getting from those in the broad from that rush of people wanting a piece of your time?
It's been incredibly positive. I haven't had a single interaction yet with anybody who has not been very welcoming. It feels a little bit like a dam has burst, maybe. I don't know if that's really the right metaphor, but it seems like there's a huge demand. Everybody's asking for us to be involved. Everyone's asking for us to help out. Everyone's asking for reviews. Everyone wants some support. It's brilliant. So I think the only question right now is how do we manage the demand and how do we deliver stuff which actually is useful in a short period of time so we don't build up expectations sky high. But I think it's great. It's quite exhilarating. Really, really thrilled.
Questions from the room here.
Hi Paul. I'm Kim Ulrich. I look after digital communications in the department. Really understand and absolutely applaud the focus on external users, but just really interested in what the UK might have done to support capability development within the government to deliver this work.
Yes. That's hugely important. So, for a lot of reasons, we can't do a digital transformation. So the DTO's name is Digital Transformation Office, and it might imply that the transformation is coming from the DTO, and that is not the case. So in the UK, I worked at the Ministry of Justice for one in GDS, and really have very strong feelings about this. Most of the transformation work has to be done in the departments and the agencies because they're the ones who are dealing with the end users. They're the ones who have the operational day-to-day knowledge of actually what users need, what's happening, how things are broken or what does work, what needs to be fixed. And it's the operational parts of those departments that have the most responsibility and ability to deliver these things out. Now, in many cases, a lot of departments are going to need a lot of help. in terms of building up their own internal delivery capability. Because a large part of what this is about is having your own ability to make the right decisions and your own ability to actually deliver the change. Not just tossing it over to a vendor and saying, okay, you guys do it, very, very sort of waterfall type way, because that's a project. That's not a product. That's a project. So in the UK, again, there was a number of different initiatives for skilling up staff, identifying who wants to work in this digital field and getting them ready. In the Ministry of Justice, we had one particular approach to it. Other departments had others. We're looking to see potentially trial an idea of what's called an academy, where we identify people who are interested in being trained up in agile methodologies, lean methodologies, as well as the specific skills required to deliver very digital service, and building new teams out of it. So working with, DHS or whoever to actually do that. And that we're right now in initial phases. We're looking to discuss that with a couple of our colleagues in the UK who've been delivering those steps there, perhaps coming out here, and finding some people here who want to do that.
I believe we have a question from online.
Hi, Paul. I've got a question from Ross at Department of Employment.
Yes.
A lot of departments use proprietary tools and languages to develop code. How can that be shared?
Well, I think we should. One of the mantras, one of the GDS mantras was and is, make things open, it makes things better. Because I think that's quite obvious. We should be avoiding proprietary tools which limit sharing. So if the idea is to be able to share stuff and to work in that way, and we're using tools that don't allow us to do that, perhaps we should be looking at tools and technologies which are open, which are shareable, where we can do the right thing.
Drawing on your UK experience, what were the key factors for success?
Okay. There was a few. Having the right approach, the right environment to work with it, massively important. Making sure you had the support of the senior management, basically, which that case meant from the Prime Minister on down, through the Cabinet, and then in every single department, at the secretary level, and so on and so forth. The reason for that being because the unit where the delivery was mostly done was in the departments. So whether it was the Department for Work and Pensions, or Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, or Home Office, or Ministry of Justice, or whatever, those were most of the delivery teams were. GDS had their own teams, they're really primarily platforms, things like Gov.uk. So getting the support from above that this is actually going to happen as a real thing, so they can actually prioritize the activities and make sure people are skilled up and support the development of those teams and their products. Massively important. Building the right thing is massively important. So not trying to boil the ocean, but actually getting something which meets a user need, which is identifiable and which is deliverable in a short period of time is massively important. Building the wrong thing quickly isn't going to get you there. Building the right thing is really important. And that's an art. And that means listening to users and watching users. It means having a strong user research function into the teams. Thirdly, building it in the right way. So using agile techniques, lean techniques, getting things out quickly, iterating. The departments that did that were the ones who did best, and are doing best, in a digital transformation. They're the ones who are delivering the most services with the highest user satisfaction at the lowest cost. That was pretty much the thing. It sounds kind of obvious, but it isn't always, because sometimes people say, well, no, I really would like to do this, 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 and this, and maybe we should ask for this information instead, and wouldn't it be great if we asked for that also? And, oh, if we also did that, wouldn't that be cool? And then you're probably going to wind up not delivering what you want to do. So keeping discipline is really important.
Okay, we've got a question here from Karen at Department of Immigration and Border Protection. Karen wants to know, do you have web accessibility analysis as part of your team?
Web accessibility analysis. I'm not quite sure exactly what is meant there, but if we're talking about accessibility for people who, yes, if we're talking about digital inclusion, and if we're talking about assisted digital support and things like that, absolutely, yes, that is part of what we do.
Thanks, Paul. Just a quick one. Given your experience in the UK and in other countries, you talked about the international network.
Yeah.
What do you consider the good measures to assess your progress? And the second part of the question is, it's the Digital Transformation Office. When do you consider the transformation done? And I know you're not looking at the project ended. What's the next step once the transformation is over? Or what do you see as the new stage would be?
Okay, so I think we could probably say that our work has been a rousing success when we're no longer needed. So when there's no more digital transformation office, it's because everybody else has gone digital, then you don't need that, right? When digital becomes part of the way the work is done, when it informs the way that policy is done, when we make sure the policy actually serves user needs, when we apply the same kind of service standard to that, service design standards to everything we do, and I think we can say that the transformation has been done, user satisfaction is high. I can say that would happen that, but I think it's a long way to go still. In terms of measures of success, I would like to see drastic improvements in how people can perceive quality of government services. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? It is about user satisfaction, government services, and cost.
I think that question and the discussion highlights a really interesting point between the role of the DTO working at the user interface and the role of policy and service delivery agencies, who, of course, are completely constrained at its core by the legislation and regulation that they administer. And so the welfare system